picture of this ticket you can put that on my face with the deal. So I'm saying, put that as a picture.
Hey, good afternoon. Lyndall here again with Marshfield Old School Times on what's turning out to be a really nice Saturday afternoon here in beautiful Marshfield, Missouri. We're at the national and international headquarters of the Marshfield Old School Times here.
Hey,
Yeah,
I see it with the wall-to-wall carpeting.
That's right, Marshfield Community Center in the George Ballard office.
Herschel Reed, depending on how old you actually are.
Junior high or high school, that's right.
Yeah.
But we are here again today, and sorry we missed last week. We took off a week, but we'll have a great time today, and we're going to welcome for the second time. You're a two-timer now.
Yeah.
Champ Herren, and officially that's Klein Champion Herren the third. So it's always good to have Champ. He's quite the historian. He's certainly a farmer, a businessman. Champ spent a lot of time growing up in Marshfield. I think he's made the comment that he was kind of everybody's stepchild or something like that, running around the northeast quadrant of the town. He's a writer, contributor to the Marshfield Mail. I know has been helping with the Historical Society's page there, and we'll talk a little bit about that. You're certainly an Ozark folklore history buff as well, and has a great interest in the study of ghosts and caves in the Ozarks. So we're going to have plenty to talk about. But primarily today we're here because we want to talk about the history of the Masonic Lodge in Marshfield and Webster County. We've had a series here lately of bringing the history of the Lions Club, the Optimist Club, the Rotary Club. And we also plan to bring the Optimist Club. We're working on getting a date there. And some of the other various clubs. And so the Masonic Lodge is certainly a very important club that we wanted to do a history on. And so with that, we're going to kind of start today's show. Now, we know a lot about Champ because he was on before back in the fall. But just briefly, Champ, why don't you remind people who you are, who you're married to, who your folks are, and some that maybe don't know you that well.
Right.
Most everybody does.
Okay.
So let's start, as Gary Price would say, when did you come to America?
When did I come? Gary could say that in only 5 words.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And he's a Masonic lodge.
Yeah. Gary's the chaplain of our lodge.
Yeah.
I'll pick on Gary just a little bit because he's a good friend. My grandparents relocated here in 1931. My grandfather and grandmother Herren, and he started practicing law out of the Dickey building, and ended up being a crippled man going around on a collections route. If you can imagine that.
Is that right?
Yeah, because that was where the money was. You had to go collect those $10 and $12 outstanding charges from the C.W. Brooks store or D.W. Robertson or whoever. So that's how he started his law practice and ran the credit bureau. And then my mother, her family's from around Seymour. Clifton Dugan and Hazel Dugan are my grandparents.
Lived and taught in this building.
Yes, in the Steve Page room right over there. Excuse me. And I have a brother, Doug, and sister Julie, and their families. And then I'm married to Sarah Hinckley, graduate in 92. And we have 4 children.
You graduated in 94.
Yes. She's a cougar.
Yeah, that's right. Well, again, most people know Champ, and they know that he was involved in the insurance business on the square in Marshfield, still is, I believe. Yeah. And if you have any questions about Medicare or anything like that, his firm are certainly experts in that area. So, but we're here, as I said, to talk about the Masonic Lodge in Marshfield and Webster County. So I'm going to let you kind of take it from there. We do have a couple of pictures here on the table with us today, and we certainly will be talking about them and charter members, and we'll be talking about the various grand masters or whatever the official name is that you guys call them. And so with that, Champ, let's talk about the Masons.
Well, Lyndall, that's a good segue right there. first of all, if you were to read every modern, and I mean modern in the last 150 years, relevant book, not fantastic, not accusing us of doing things that we have never or never will do. You'd basically have to live 3 or 4 lifetimes to get them all consumed. You wouldn't be able to. It's the most written about subject, other than probably religion, that there is a secular subject. It's not always. There's not always secular either. To put it out real quickly here, Freemasonry is a fraternity of men who believe in God. Okay, believe in a higher power, believe in a deity. We don't tell people what that means. I, as a Christian, believe in God, but a good Jewish friend of mine or brother of mine might, he also believes in God. A Muslim believes in the same God. We're all children of Abraham in that sense. Rudyard Kipling was an Indian. He was a Freemason, and he said there were as many as 23 holy books on the altar. In our lodge, Webster 98 up here, it's the Holy Bible. But that does not mean that it is everywhere. It's an international organization. The history of Masonry, and I'll be brief because we could do a whole series of podcasts on that,
right,
and drive your viewership, way down.
Well, maybe not. It's interesting.
But it comes out of the British Isles, and modern Masonry comes out of Scotland. It's very much English. In fact, it has a royal patron in England. The Grand Lodge of England does. If the ceremony is very similar to what you'd see when you open Parliament, how we conduct business, it's not that different. People say, well, the Freemasons keep a lot of secrets. Let me tell you, in this day and age, nothing is really secret.
Right.
If you go to the Library of Congress, you can find it. If you haven't already found it elsewhere. States in America are divided up into Grand Lodges. There's not a Grand Lodge of the United States as there is in Europe or in England, other countries. Each individual state represents its own jurisdiction. Up here at the picture, we have Doc Blinn, or Most Worshipful Brother J. Edward Blinn. He was Grand Master of the state in 1980. He's the only Grand Master to come out of Webster Lodge.
He's the top dog in the whole state
for that year.
The single, okay.
Yeah. And he would have been a Grand Officer for probably 10 years prior. So, in what they call in the line, it's an ascending line of officers. Every lodge is governed that same way, with a master, wardens, deacons, and other officers.
If I may, so then would all of the Grand Masters form a coalition of a national?
They probably get together and get their picture made,
right?
But I don't know. I've never seen anything.
There's not necessarily a national Grand Master. Then
there are national organizations for Masons, and there are national organizations for appendant Masonry, such as the York Rite and the Scottish Rite and the Shrine, who are all their requirement is you have to be a Blue Lodge Mason. The little lodges of Blue Lodge. Yeah. So, I'm gonna say this, and this is, I have no way of knowing this, but if you watch things like Oak Island on TV, because it's gonna come up, somebody's gonna say this, or what have you, they talk a lot about Freemasonry, and I think that's sort of interesting. I think it's that's kind of cool, but I don't put a whole lot of stock in that, because if we go along the theory that the Knights Templar hid in with the stonemasons in the British Isles, and thus were not executed, burned at the stake, whatever, bad deal. Then you can say, okay, perhaps that's where some of their ritual came from. If you say, oh, Freemasonry is a key to unlocking some greater mystical truth, well, until you can identify what that mystical truth is, it just leads you to any open-ended conclusion you want to. It's a "are you beating your wife" type question. So I don't think that it's a, what are you involved in any mystical act? No, I'm not.
Yeah, I think some of that has been manifested through since the internet has has entered our world. And
well, we had a political party based on anti-Masonry, the Know Nothing Party. You know, luminaries like Millard Fillmore, when he tried to run for
is that right?
second term, were nominated by the Know Nothing Party.
Yeah, it's always been there, but you know, the conspiracy theories, the deep state, the you know, the eye on the pyramid on the back of a dollar bill or whatever, that all that kind of stuff.
The eye in Masonry is the all-seeing eye of God.
Yeah,
it never misses anything.
Right.
So it harkens back to our belief in one living and true God. While not religious in practice, yes, we pray. Yes, we pray a lot. We pray at every meal, every meeting, every ceremony. We pray, and that's. We don't tell our members though that you must confine God to this container.
But don't you think when these clubs, whether it's the Rotary or Optimus or whatever, that were formed 100+ years ago, of course you guys have been around a lot longer than that.
Sure.
And I know you're going to touch on that.
Sure.
But don't you think a lot of times these civic clubs, social clubs were around for each of those folks to learn from one another? We didn't have the ways to learn like we do today by picking up our cell phone and looking something up, or
it's
even churches.
It's not hard to see the spread of Freemasonry in the British speaking world, which soon covered a lot of territory, and the rise in democracy.
Yeah,
it's self-governance. It's self-government. Yes, under a jurisdiction, under some authority, it's self-governance.
Right.
It's local government. It's local, control of that, and that's part of. And I'm going to circle back around. I'm going to circle back around definitely to that, because we've seen that. Let's talk about Webster and some of the other lodges. Webster Lodge number 98, AF and AM, Ancient Free and Accepted Masons. If you can see up here, was organized in 1857 and chartered in 1858. So this is the oldest about the oldest organization in the county, period.
2 years shy of being as old as our county.
Yeah, the county's older.
Right, by 2 years.
Marshfield may be
about the same age.
Yeah,
that's right. Marshfield was a community, but it wasn't an official city until a couple of years after the county. So
when they took the 40 acres and laid out the square, the county seat was in Hazelwood up to that point. Right. So Union and Confederate soldiers both rode. This is one of the only lodges that was active during the Civil War, and both Union and Confederate soldiers in uniform attended lodge. So there is, and there is a
together.
Yeah, together.
Wow. Was it in the location where it is now?
So let's talk about that, because the lodge has moved around a lot. The lodge met in the courthouse from time to time. The lodge met in the tops of buildings. The lodge and a lot of other organizations finally found a home in the top of the lumber yard. And the D.W. Robertson lumber yard.
Robertson Hardware Building.
Right, which was right. No. Before, so there was the lumber yard building, and then there was the lumber yard building, the circuit court building, and all these lodges were the same thing. Now, was that in the upstairs of the Robertson Block building, or was it in the upstairs over there between Randy Clare's office and the bank? I don't know. Both places.
I think. Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, and again, I don't want to deviate from your train of thought, but so the lodge, or that was above.
That was above there.
5J Appliance between the bank and Randy's office.
It
was the IOOF. Is that what?
Well, so it's the IOOF is International Order of Oddfellows, and that was over between the bank.
By the bank.
Yeah, and the pawn shop. Yeah. So
that's a different deal.
Yeah, we're gonna go into that in a minute.
Okay.
But, so our lodge is organized, and there are after the Civil War period, there are several other lodges organized in the county. Now defunct are Niangua and Duncan. They're gone. They merged with Webster. Niangua gets merged, strangely enough, as automobiles come out, because think about it. You could take the family to town. They could eat, they could go to the movies, they could do whatever, and you go to lodge.
Mm-hmm.
Eat, you could do your business on Friday afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, that's why Nine would just pretty well folded up, in my opinion. Duncan, the town never went anywhere, and so it kind of disappeared. Hazelwood and Mount Olive are founded in 1872. Caitlin McConnell did a really good piece on Mount Olive Lodge on Ozarks Alive. Check that out. Nothing, I can't add anything to that other than Mount Olive's unusual because it's in the Southern tradition of putting a lodge above the Methodist Church. That was Mount Olive Methodist Church at one point.
Okay.
And it is out in the middle of the country and is not with a visible municipality, and it's thriving.
Sort of the Panther Creek community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Panther Creek, Portland.
Yeah, which is north of Portland, which I don't know, at one time it may have been a more dominant community than Portland before Highway 60 was developed or whatever. I don't know. But
Hazelwood and Henderson are named after communities, of course, that don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Hazelwood being the first county seat, north of Seymour. I could take you to it. And Henderson, of course, another forgotten community north of Rogersville. Yeah.
But again, I think the main pathway of travel was north of 60, and it probably picked those communities up.
Yeah.
Hazelwood, Panther Creek.
Well, it became,
Henderson,
there was nothing in Henderson to keep the lodge there, so you move it to Rogersville.
Yeah, after the highway.
It didn't happen with Hazelwood was moved to Seymour in probably the 1880s.
But of course, you know, those communities we just talked about, those three, were all on the river.
Sure.
And that's how the communities were established.
That's right. That's right. So, you have
Webster and Hazelwood and
Mount Olive
still
and Henderson.
And Henderson.
There are four in the county, yes. And they are going through the same figuring out in the new world we're in right now what we do, same as every other. For instance, let me give you some insight here. When we go back to where the Masonic Lodge used to meet, and I'm going to touch on that for 1 minute. The Masonic Lodge met there until the lumberyard burned in 1924. Somebody's going to correct me on that, but it was in the 20s.
See, I think the lumberyard, and there'll be somebody, maybe Dr. Todd or Ralph or Tom Farr Jr. or someone, but I think the lumberyard was where Cecil's engine service was. The Robertson Hardware building was on the corner, but then the lumberyard was the Bergner, Bowman, Matthews, or whatever, and then they moved after the building burned. They may have moved to where Marshfield Lumber was when we knew it as kids.
See, originally, when they built the Robertson Block building, the idea was for the upstairs to be an opera house. He tried to find shareholders to turn it into an opera house.
Uh-huh.
And he did, and he had enough money, he could have funded the whole thing. I don't know why he didn't, but he was looking for shareholders in the Marshfield Chronicle.
I'll be darned.
So,
yeah.
So when that burned, the Red Men, which was a group of fellers that dressed up like Indians, and the Odd Fellows, and the Royal Neighbors, and the Women's Christian Temperance Union, and the Good Templars, which was the WCTU's male-female organization, and the Woodmen of the World were all basically, and it ended basically the Red Men, the Royal Neighbors, and the Woodmen here locally. The Odd Fellows, of course, had their building up there. We remember that. I remember going to dinners and stuff up there before that was all done. They ended up rebuilding another building, and then they just sort of
disbanded.
Not really, just sort of, these organizations just sort of waste away.
Yeah.
They just, attrition's the killer here. So let's talk about attrition in these things, because I think this is a very interesting point.
I think we should make a note, since you mentioned that, when the Odd Fellows built a building out.
I'm catching on you. Yeah, I'm rubbing off on you, Lyndall.
They built a building out on Cedarbrook, and
it's now used for the American Legion.
That's right. And when they,
very good
said, when they kind of wilted away, the few members that were left, they I think gave or sold that building for $1 to the American Legion of Webster County, which was a phenomenal gesture by them, because American Legion had a good, viable group, and they didn't have a place, and so that worked out really well. Similar to what the Lions Club did with the seniors.
And it's sad because in the 80s, we lived out there. We lived out on Roanoke, which is the next roads down, I think. And when that happened, I remember there being that whole lot full of vehicles out there at the Oddfellows.
Yeah.
And I know that Dr. Glenn and a lot of the Masons were also members of the Oddfellows. So it was kind of sad to see that go.
You could have been members of
they weren't competitors. I mean, not in that way.
Yeah.
But what we're facing with here, so in Masonry in Missouri has dropped by 90,000 people in the last decade, from 130 to 30.
Wow.
So, or I may not have that right, but that's darn close.
Yeah.
So what we're facing is, I believe, when the greatest generation and the silent generation were both big groups of people. Thank God, because they fought World War II in Korea.
That's right.
But I think what happened is to a degree, a lot of organizations became inflated in numbers. And they're looking back now and saying, well, dang, in 1970, we had 200 members, or we had 150 members, or whatever it was. Well, yeah, Gen X, Gen Y are smaller than, and the boomers are more mobile. They're more skeptical. They don't like to, as a group, sit in for necessarily the same types of things as their parents did, which is unfortunate because when an organization's embedded in the community and is performing and helping and has a good it's a good time.
I think it should also be noted, though, we were a predominantly agrarian society then, and so those farmers were isolated. They farmed. They were on their farm all day. They milked, and the one night a week they could get together with their buddies. They came to town, and they were in the Lions Club or the lodge or whatever it might be. And again, that's those days. It's not like that anymore.
Right.
We have instant access all the time to anybody we want to have access to. So it's just a different world, and that's part of the reason the clubs aren't as popular.
In my opinion, and this is one guy's opinion, but in my opinion, if you are an organization and you are not embedded right now, a charitable organization, you are not embedded, I keep using that word embedded, into the flow, the river of need that flows through your community every day, then you're not going to be around.
Right.
Fortunately, and I'm going to brag on the Brethren of Webster 98, we're getting ready to have our 24th annual truck and tractor pull. For years, that money went to the Children's Miracle Network, and I think maybe a decade ago, the question started being asked, well, why don't we do something local for that? The Masonic Home of Missouri offers a sort of a grant-based match for a 501c3. So the lodge is able to fund the vast majority of 9, if not all of it, of 9 was backpack program.
Great.
For 9 schools.
Yeah.
They're also able to contribute. Marshfield has more stakeholders, so they have more contributors. So we give a good portion to Marshfield, of course. But Niagara, there's a greater need, and they just don't have the people who are willing to come pony up a couple grand and say, here, you need this for that.
Sure,
so
that's great.
We do so we will have that on June 1st, and that's always a big deal, because that's a big fundraiser, and it allows us to put a lot of money back into the community.
That's the one too, I think, where you recognize a former truck or tractor pull person, or was that?
We have.
And maybe you may see in honor of
the Lions Club does that a lot.
The Lions does. Okay, maybe it's the Lions, but
yes, and that's another thing. The Lions Club is a very good example of, if you're a civic organization, what you need to be doing.
Yeah. They're helping the community.
Oh my
gosh, clubs are.
Well, yeah, the Lions Club went through that transformation earlier. and think of the money they raise and the impact that they make.
Right, absolutely.
It's out.
That's-
I'm not
again,
saying
that's-
Rotary and Optimists and the others don't, but
Well, the Optimists are predominantly youth and
Mhm.
young folks, and a lot of they do the sports program, and I know that's their focus is a lot of times on the youth and
Yes.
children.
yes.
And then Rotary, of course, has the park, and they've all got their own interests.
Mhm.
I think the lodge, the building.
Mhm.
I know back in the
Let's
60s,
get back to that.
because
Let's get back to that because
I
when
remember
that
the
burned,
rock building was all rock.
right.
And then when we were, you may not have been born yet.
I wasn't born
I
yet.
was. I remember the day that it was burning. It burned, and you left a rock shell there, and then they had to come in with the new brick structure, and they left the part of the rock. But anyway, tell us about that.
So after the lumberyard burns, they decide that they need a space to meet. And by this point, you also have the Eastern Star.
20s or 30s.
Yeah, late 20s.
Yeah.
Probably. I kind of think now on that burning, I think it was 1928.
Yeah.
And I think in 1929, they bought that lot and started building because it was dedicated in either 30 or 31. And it was exactly like the old Rainey Funeral Home. It
Yep.
was
Yep.
it was Ozark Giraffe style
Mhm.
of rock.
Stone.
It's concrete, and it burned in 1970 or 71,
Mhm.
right in there. And they did a remodel of it and bricked it and rededicated it on a cornerstone out there, and it's been there.
Yeah,
it's been there ever since.
Yeah.
And we're for years we were the only organization to have their own building, other than the Oddfellows.
Yeah.
And everybody's used it. In fact, you can rent it now if you need a space.
Yeah.
You can. It's a good working stove, good kitchen. So just follow us on Facebook and message us or get a hold of one of us.
A lot of farmers or a lot of fundraisers.
Mhm.
Out of that building.
Well, the Lions Club used it for their pancake for
Yeah, they did.
30 years,
Yeah, they
for
did.
40
They
years.
did.
Of course, a lot of Masons are
Right.
Lions Club members too.
Something I wanted to go back to too with the history of the Masonic Lodge internationally or in general. What was the connection to actual brick masons?
Okay.
The name and the designation. How did that all begin?
So here's the thing, and you need to think. So
your logo even has the tools, the masonic tools.
Right. So I'm going to catch a little flack for this because this is an incomplete answer. And if you really want to know more, we can certainly help you with that if you're a male between the age of 18 and 80. But no, you can find this information. So Freemasonry, the rituals and the ceremony are the allegorical building of King Solomon's temple. Okay. King Solomon being charged by God with finding a place for the Ark of the Covenant to rest, and thus God to rest.
Mm-hmm.
So Freemasonry takes you through the building and to the completion of King Solomon's temple, which is about really refining one's life from the vices and superfluities of life, perhaps.
They're getting pretty deep here, Chan.
Yeah. So I think the best. I honestly think that the best allegory, we could say, to put it in very simple terms, Masonry likes to take good men and make them better, and it is allegorically described as a stone from the quarry that is refined for the builder's use to fit into, with other stones, a building, something useful.
Refining as in
Shaping.
making men better,
Shaping,
making
yeah.
people better.
Yeah.
And of course, in those early days, obviously all structures were formed from stone. They were masons. We didn't have necessarily.
We understood the
We didn't have steel workers, did we?
No. You got to understand, at one point in time, concrete was an absolutely magical substance.
Oh yeah.
It was the work of wizards and alchemists and the Romans. But that was something that heats up.
Yeah.
What do you mean? So
we'll start calling Darren Clare the Grand Wizard now.
Yeah, well, maybe not wizard. No wizard. No. So
well, it is too if you think about it, though. I mean, those great builders of pyramids and structures in days thousands of years ago, the early builders of our civilization would have been some form of a mason or stone mason
They
or
would
brick
have had
mason
to.
or
And
whatever.
when you consider the massive public works projects put on by the Catholic Church all through the Middle Ages, where you weren't employed on this church building for 10 years, you were generationally employed on this church building as your father, grandfather, great grandfather, and as the next 3 or 4 of your descendants will be as well. So it was, or more. So it
your sect in life.
Yeah, that was where you did, and naturally you did not necessarily put out your. I think some of the secrecy in Freemasonry was trade secrets. All of a sudden, the skylines of Europe changed after the Crusades. You can put whatever spin on that you want to. Some people say, "Oh, the Knights Templar came back, and they had this what." Mechanical engineering, this esoteric thing called mechanical engineering, and all of a sudden we're able to raise stone structures into arches and buttressing up with very thin blocks an edifice of hundreds of feet. Right. I mean, think about that.
Yeah,
that's a complete.
It is.
That's good. When everybody's living in mud and dottle huts, that's a complete game changer.
It really is.
So
some form of indoor plumbing probably began in that era.
Well, yeah, and sanitation.
Yeah,
rediscovering what the Romans already knew. There's your Renaissance right there. A lot of ways the Crusades sparked the Renaissance, in my opinion. But to get back to what the Masonic Lodge does locally, if you look at the tools of masonry, each tool in masonry is symbolic. Even our aprons are white lambskin leathern aprons. My lambskin, I wore it the first night of my initiation, and I will wear it again when I am cold and moldering in the ground. And the officers' aprons. There's different things like that. But the tools, the trowel, the square, the compass, the level. Those are all things that meet on the level.
Right.
You on the level, Lyndall? You're on the level. So that's
try to be.
Yeah.
No, those are good points. When we did the 100th anniversary of this building in 2016, which I can't believe it's been 7 years ago now, but 8 years ago actually, almost coming up. The original cornerstone that on this building, which is still there, had the Freemason logo, I guess, for lack of emblem, and so obviously that triggered me to do a little bit of homework on why was that done. So I happened to be in Jeff City at that time, and I got to be friends with a gentleman that was he worked for actually the Associated or the Electric Utilities of Missouri, and he was. I can't tell you if he may have been the Grand Master like doctor. He was something at that level. And so we discussed them coming down and helping us with our new cornerstone that we installed in the building. And of course,
there was also one in the jail.
Yeah.
For the new Justice Center.
Okay, yeah, okay, good. Anyway, they came down, did the ceremony, and the local lodge came and helped. And it was really a fun day. It was hot that day.
Yeah.
Senator Blunt was able to come, and he was part of the ceremony as well, and we had a good fun time that day out here on the front yard of the campus. But it was really interesting, the ceremony and all of the language they used and the whole procedure, and then to have several guys from out of Marshfield that came to help do that, and the importance, I guess, 100 years ago of how much that would have been, which is still important, but maybe meant more even back in those
days. Dedication ceremony with oil and grain and wine and salt and all the different things, all the different things that make life good.
Yeah.
And so I went in when I was 20 years old, and Ellis Jackson and I were great friends.
Mhm.
And he said, I'll get you a petition. And then he died. And so Marvin Davis, someone we both know, who was minister of the Methodist Church here in town, he was actually grand chaplain of the state, or one of them.
Okay.
And I went to him and I said, Mr. Jackson was going to give me a petition for the Masonic Lodge, and I don't know nothing about it. I said, I kind of asked him for one. He said, well, let me get Ed Blinn on the phone. And so there it was. And it was so amazing that it was everybody in town.
Yeah.
When I finally looked around,
There were a lot.
It was everybody in town.
Yeah.
You didn't know who
That's
till that night.
I
It was kind of interesting. So then you see that there's lots of things. And for years, the Masons were very poor publicists of what they did.
Yeah.
And I think that has a lot to do with the contraction.
The mystery.
Yeah. Contraction of members.
Oh, I see.
I mean, you can't put your candle under a bucket.
Yeah.
And
Right.
And that's sort of, I think, what we have done.
Mhm.
And so we're trying to not have written up for the paper, trying to write up once a month what the lodge is up to.
But would you say, though, that's the mystery and the intrigue of those of us that aren't Masons? That's part of the, the mystique of wanting to be one.
I think it is.
And back
when I was
maybe not
20,
so much now.
When I was 20, that was definitely a part of it. So I was fascinated
Exactly.
with it.
Exactly. And the fact that you had to petition, you had to
get investigated,
and then every now and then someone would get blackballed. Okay. And a lot of times, the reason they might have got blackballed was because they didn't agree with the politics of that person, or that person had done something to that one person personally. Or
it's very seldom that it happens. It has happened, and in most of the cases that I know of cases where it's happened where absolutely it should have happened, and I know of cases where it's happened where I was so aggravated to even learn that it happened.
And really, that it's like a filibuster. I mean, they can control. One person could control the fate of that member.
It's lasted so long for so well and governed itself so well that I really don't like to innovate.
Oh no, I understand.
You have to.
And it wasn't me, by the way.
To quote 1776, it's a revolution. We're going to have to offend someone. But my thing is those two were honorable men. To paraphrase Shakespeare, they too were honorable men, and then you get sort of some insight into, holy mackerel, you all have done this, and this. It's pretty cool.
That is neat. So you want to talk a little bit more about Doc Blinn, maybe?
Doc Blinn was
some of your members or charter members.
In fact, as I took him off the wall today, I said, Doc, we're going somewhere. I used to ride around with him when we'd go to different Masonic events. I said, I haven't traveled with you in a while. So he's here.
Yeah.
Hello, Doc.
Yeah.
I'll take this right here.
Remarkable guy, Doc Blinn was.
Yes. And a true example of what a man should be, truly.
Yeah.
Doc Blinn helped a lot of people.
He did.
And
had a hospital, delivered lots of babies in the 50s and 60s, and had a hospital here in the 50s, as most small towns did in those days.
So this is his official Masonic portrait with him holding the gavel. And that is a Grand Master's apron. It's trimmed in purple. The photo is faded over time, whereas the local lodges are blue. His jewel and warts, of course, top hat. Doc was a dresser.
Oh, yeah.
And then here, pardon my boarding house reach, if I don't knock it off, we have the past. I brought the other one too, but there's less on it. We have the past masters of Webster Lodge. So let's go over some of the names of the charters. Day, Jameson.
You're talking about early families of Webster County right there.
I had to put on my glasses. Hames. Mm-hmm. McBride, Burford, Wharton, Cole, Hollis, Turner. And then if I go through, Colonel Noah Hampton is master many times. D.W. Robertson, who owned the lumberyard. Mm-hmm. Isaac Johnson. And then, look here, Doc Campbell, Batson Campbell, Claude Wells, Warren Newton, Tom Erickson, Tony Augustini, Wilbur Newton, Sam Goza, George Melton, Charles Bolson.
Those are all
70,
60, and 70 names.
Yeah, John W. Greer. recently passed away. He was our our oldest member. You know,
Mm-hmm.
G.L. Fraker, W. Noel Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
They were cousins.
Yeah. So truly a diverse group of folks from because Freemason. So I hear this sometimes. Oh, it's a club for people who have a lot of money. No, it's not.
No,
it's not. It's a very it is very egalitarian. In worldly wealth and honors mean little.
Who are some of your colleagues down there now that you serve with?
I'd have to kill you.
And of
but,
course, well, and you're going to have a chili supper here.
Yes, we are.
Next Saturday night.
Next Saturday.
Okay.
Saturday from 11 in the morning until
Right.
2 in the afternoon. We're having gumbo, chili, soup and stew, bread and desserts for $5.
$5.
Now, can you beat that?
You can't beat
all you can eat for $5.
No,
and if you feel guilty about that price, please feel free to give more at the door because it goes to the Forgotten Initiative, and we'll send it through the Masonic Home, and we'll get some matching funds.
That's awesome. Now, before your time, when me and your brother Doug were kids, the saying was, "You can't beat a deal like that at Shoppers Fair."
How long Shoppers Fair been on?
That's what I'm saying. You wouldn't recognize that. But, well, Shoppers Fair was the phenomenon of the 60s, you know, when it opened up. Why, you didn't have Gibson's yet, you didn't have Kmart yet, you didn't have Walmart yet, you know.
You'd been Franklin in places, maybe.
That's right. Yeah. And you can't beat a deal like that at Shoppers Fair. It was the big discount store. So
you're so colloquial.
Well, you know.
Anyway, we'll this next Saturday, March 16th, 11 to 2.
So give us some of the names of some that would be helping to serve.
So the Pat Blensler
Mm-hmm.
is master this year.
Is Master the local of the? He's the
head for this year. Yeah, he's the worshipful
okay.
master.
Yeah.
Mike Frazier is our secretary. Charlie Uchman, myself, Gary Price, Glenn Cron, Tom Reeser, Rick Anderson, Mike Schroeder, Brian Brooks, whole bunch of fellas.
So what is your average membership now?
We're around 100 members.
Are you?
Yeah.
Wow, that's
and we have new ones coming in. I find Gen Xers far more interested, and Zoomers far more interested in Masonry than my.
History does sort of cycle.
I said Gen Xers, Gen Z, Zoomers, and Millennials far more interested than my X and Y generation.
Yeah.
So
history sort of cycles. It has a tendency to.
I think you'll see Zoomers be a more traditional generation.
Yeah.
Than perhaps the generation.
So
preceding.
When do you guys meet?
Well, traditionally we met the Friday after the full moon.
Okay.
But we meet the fourth Tuesday of the month.
Fourth Tuesday.
Yeah.
And what's your average attendance now? Around 20.
So if what I always tell anybody, if you're a man and you're interested in checking out Masonry, come by and have supper with us.
Yeah.
Maybe get on Facebook and let us know you're coming.
Right.
So it's not like cold cut night.
Yeah.
We're gonna have meatloaf though next month. So if you're a member, I want to see you there. And if you're interested,
do you cater that in, or do you guys get together and cook?
We cook a lot. We have the junior warden cooks, and we have an officer who cooks, and we have people who like to cook. I like to cook a little, so I help. I make the gumbo, which isn't gumbo because I don't use a roux. I use it's a seafood stew, basically.
We'll call it a champo. Guess gonna have some champo.
Yeah. Champ's
chowder. You could bottle that up and sell it at the penny pitcher, couldn't you?
Huh?
You could bottle that up and sell it at the penny pitcher.
Yeah, in spite of federal, state, and local laws forbidding me, I guess I could.
Minor detail.
Could and should being two different words. But yeah, if we could see everybody out for that, and mark your calendar for June 1st. If you're all of my brethren out there, if you're not busy the Friday before, we're going to clean the lodge. For fun. Please be there. And if you're make a dessert, bring a dessert if you can. Come help for a couple hours. We'd appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So That's basically the parents. I want to give a shout out to another charity we have a big part to do with. In the fall, we do the same thing for parents as teachers.
Okay.
And if you haven't checked out what the Forgotten Initiative does, which is one we're raising for, or Parents as Teachers,
right,
there's some other very good charities of that nature in town.
Forgotten Initiative,
please do so.
They help those foster kids. And
oh my gosh,
the parents of the foster kids. It's a great organization, and I think aren't they collaborating with, is it Destiny Church now? Maybe they've got some space out there and their welfare.
I think they use. I don't know. I think they use an office out there.
Yeah,
it's been mentioned.
Yeah,
but yeah. So it's a tremendous.
Yes,
it's a tremendous organization, and it's one the lodge is better for trying to help.
Right.
Truly.
Well, this has been very interesting. We're not gonna do the secret handshake or anything or nothing.
I mean, you pay $150 and get a clean background check, Lyndall. Come on up. We'll show you all that stuff.
No, I wouldn't want you to breach any trust or
no. There's nothing to breach.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm just kidding you.
Yeah, there's nothing really to do that.
Well, it's like all these other clubs and organizations they did help build America. I mean, there's no question about it. Whether you want to call them a Mason or you want to call them a Lion, it doesn't really matter, or an optimist. They helped build these communities and did things in the communities when there were not others to do it. Especially when you go through times like the Depression, World War II, whatever it might have been. In your case, even the Civil War would have
Revolutionary War in my case.
Well, that's true. That's true. So we appreciate that very much. I want to spend just a little bit of time today, Champ, also as a follow-up maybe to your previous time on our show, on our podcast, talk a little bit about the Webster County Historical Society and the work that you and others are doing there right now. Part of that is to help a weekly contribution to the Marshfield Mail. And then, of course, any follow-up you'd like to give to your cave stories, your folklore that you've been studying, and I think people really.
I'd rather talk about the Historical Society.
Yeah, let's do.
We have a tremendous. If you want to find out something local, you can go to the Historical Society, and generally they're going to have it.
It's a resource.
It's a tremendous resource, and I got really, I think as I shared with you last time, I really got interested in. I decided at 48 that there's probably a dozen or so things I really need to get written down locally before I'm 80 years old.
Right.
Gone.
That's why we're doing this. Absolutely.
And so one of them, the Dick Cullen lynching and several things, I discovered newspapers.com. And I don't know that you can truly get heroin in an electronic form, but by golly, that's close, because I can sit there and I can look at that for hours on end. I can look at it until, in fact, when they're faded, I figured out you can take shooting glasses at night and you can read gray.
Yeah.
I mean, So
that's,
went deep down that rabbit hole.
That is awesome, because there's very few things really in life that will hold interest like that for me.
So my favorite,
and that's really neat.
I busted one local myth: the little girl who was buried with her bicycle, who was supposedly hit by a car and buried with her bicycle. Well, that didn't happen. She died of some lingering. She was about my father's age. I'd heard this story. Lori Herren told me this story. She'd heard it from Ralph Jr. Everybody'd heard this story, and it's not so.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the cave.
Yeah.
I believe when they were mining, and there was a mining boom in this town like you've never seen before. You talk about inflation. Inflation was nuts.
Mm-hmm.
There was no hardware to be had. There was no lumber to be had. There was no rope to be had. Shovels, picks, crowbars, none of that to be had. The real estate in town tripled. Farms near mines like the Tunnel Mine or down on in the Pleasant Hill area, or even here close to town, I won't say because somebody will get in it.
Yeah.
the property around that just swelled in value immediately.
Well, did it also? It was a place in the summertime to be able to stay cool. Cave.
Well,
I mean, to have a cave
to
on your
have a
property
cave-
was like having a spring.
To have a cave
You
on
know.
your property was great. You could hang meat in it. You could do everything.
Absolutely,
else.
it's a refrigerator.
Yeah, and potatoes, and turnips,
Mhm.
everything else will keep better in there. Particularly out of light, that's a big factor. But my point is there is not a cave. There are caves around here, and there may be some fissure underneath that red sandstone. You remember when the ditches were on Crittenden Street and those shelves appeared
Oh
about
yeah,
every
before
10
they put the
feet of rock?
stormwater system.
Yeah,
in.
just raised the looks of the whole place.
Yeah.
So the fact of the matter is you're sitting on this huge sandstone shelf, and sandstone does come off in sheets.
Mhm.
But I find
Flakes.
I find nothing in any of the geology that's been done. There's faults that go through here. There could be a chasm, but it's not a limestone cave. It's not a cave.
Yeah. Smaller. Maybe.
Yeah. Now we
areas.
have an earthquake and half the square swallows up, then
Yeah.
I'm wrong.
Well, we know there's some small caves or
Sure.
cavernous areas, but nothing. No network of chambers.
Why aren't there
that
big
connect.
caves here?
Yeah.
There's big caves here because between about Niangua and Northview, there's a huge sheet of rock and a huge fault that runs from the northeast side of town all the way to somewhere out by the golf
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
Or, well, from Niangua to the northeast section of town.
The set of Webster County Historical Society booklets that were done in the 70s that I have over here that we've talked about in other shows. You know, Mr. Bolson had done a lot of research on the geology of Webster County and Marshfield and those, even the water aquifers and those shelves of stone that traveled or that went all the way across. So
There's a really good report from about 1974, 5, 6, somewhere in there on this fault. And this Northview rock out here is kind of famous. I honestly think there's probably there's probably some ancient
limestone.
Yeah.
Northview Court.
Yeah. So there's a different rock. There's a different. So this
Different
red sandstone that you get out of the Spinabel apartments down here down at the quarry that you could see plainly on the side of the Robertson Block building and others around town.
Right.
That's all. That should be further down than it is my understanding.
Well,
There's a displaced layer that was on top of it.
It cropped up with our higher elevation.
Right.
Well,
What was on top of it? That's my question. Was there something on top of it, or we have an earthquake or a volcanic event that pushes that up? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Probably never will.
But I mean, we're on the top ridge of the Ozark Mountains here, so something.
If you think about the springs in Marshfield and the elevation, they're almost shut-ins. That water has to come up. It's not like it's. I'm not saying there's a shut-in, but that water has to rise a long ways to get to those springs.
Yeah.
So
Our elevation's high.
But right now, so I'm writing some stuff down. I wrote a thing on mad stones. Basically, my point is don't use one if you get bit by a rabid animal. Mad stones being a calcium concretion from the gut of a herbivore, mainly a deer. You're supposed to be able to treat wounds and different things. Wrote a 2-parter on that. Wrote on the cave. I've got a lot of interest in folk medicine.
The stockade under the square.
I'm going to get back to Civil War at some point. I really right now want to find somebody who's a wart witch, who removes warts, or somebody who could stop blood. Stopping blood is one of those interesting phenomenons that occurs and is real. And I don't know why, and I don't think anybody does. We can, basically, if you take a certain verse of the Bible out of Ephesians, I walked by thee and saw thee polluted in thine own blood. You can stop blood. That's the theory. There's a lot of testimonials to this. It's a charm.
Yeah.
It's biblical. If you look at it, I hate the M word magic, but if you look at it, it is what was considered among the Pennsylvania Dutch and the American Germans, who basically populated this area with the Scots Irish. It's a charm. It's a way to do something.
Right.
And there are people tell you that you shouldn't be doing that. And there's whole faiths dedicated to that's a part of their practice.
Sure.
So different things, using things like that. So I'm very interested in finding that. If you've got a madstone that you've taken out of a Webster County deer, boy, I'd like to see it. If you killed the white deer for a madstone, I'm angry at you.
How big is the madstone?
They can vary in size. They can
Are
be,
they like a gallstone or a kidney stone? Or
I guess,
they're a deposit, some kind of
Hairball.
a calcium deposit or something. Yeah.
hairball.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of fascinating that
Mhm.
you have that phenomenon lasted as long as
Right.
it did for thousands of years on
Yeah.
up into modern day,
Right.
competing with modern medicine, which all in retrospect wasn't that modern.
Yeah.
But yeah, so right now, one of the projects I'm really proud of is I'm working with a dedicated little group of people, and we meet every once in a while and we go through the paper, and we're doing the nostalgia page.
Mhm.
And we're trying to put a little hair on the nostalgia page because you can wow, you can only do so much of one thing or another. So there's lots of things that weren't in the nostalgia page that I think are great.
Right.
This week, next couple of weeks, we'll have some
Some
different
neat stuff.
things in there.
So, for those of you that may not have noticed, if you pick up the Marshfield Mail, and hopefully you do, still a lot of fun, good information, local information there. The Webster County Historical Society is now contributing the full page.
Mhm.
Used to be a little quarter page or less of, seems like yesterday and
Looking back,
yeah, had different names. Well, now the paper has been gracious enough to allow the Historical Society to do a whole page, and they're getting even further into history
Mhm.
documents and posting those and publishing that on that page. It's been interesting. You guys have done a great job pulling back some.
So have you
even
followed
more
the White
information.
Elephants basketball team? Have you followed the basketball game?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we got more on that coming up.
Mhm.
I want a 1920 Marshfield yearbook because I
don't have one down there.
No, we got 21 and 22. I've got
Okay.
21 and 22 at
Okay.
home, but I don't have anything before that. And
Right.
so, no, hold on. I've got 25 and 26. The museum's got 21 and 22, and we need 1924.
Right. Yeah.
So if you have a Marshfield yearbook from 1924, I want to identify those guys on that team. And there's surely a picture of that team. But for those who missed out, Marshfield had a team, and it beat another team. Or Marshfield had two local teams that played, and then a group of merchants known as the White Elephants challenges them to a game, and their names are like Fatty Fian and Bulgy Turner and all of these names that it's all for, and we've got even advertisements coming up for more games that we're going to be putting in the paper.
Okay.
So they scored one goal against 30. I think these were 1-point goals back then.
Yeah.
So they scored one goal to the 30 by the actual athletic boys.
That would have been no, this gym wasn't built till 26, so that would have been in some kind of an old gym we think was here on the property, maybe.
I keep getting a reference to a gymnasium or an auditorium, and I about decided it was a freestanding building.
Yeah,
a barn?
somewhere here maybe.
A barn-like structure, perhaps.
The east wing over here was built in 26, so we know that's when the gym was built that your dad and my dad played in and so forth.
And this is we're right now we're in 1924, March 1924 on that. We do 25, 50, 75, and then 100, which is 24, and then 125.
Yeah.
And we also do 125 from the Marshfield Chronicle, the other newspaper.
Okay, good. That's great. Yeah, it's fun. I'm sure glad you guys are doing that, and it takes time. You've got some great volunteers down there.
Mhm.
You really
do.
And it's it's a really a crown jewel for our community to have that historical society in the way they've been able to grow and add and research, do the research that they can over the years.
Yeah, and there's so much more to do down there too.
Oh, I'm sure.
I find
I'm
it
sure.
I kind of keeps me inspired.
I hope that maybe they can expand and even become larger someday. And of course, there needs to be a good funding source.
If Champ Herren had his way, and that's always problematic, but if Champ Herren had his way, I would love to see them purchase an older home, and we take a lot of the hardware that we have in the museum and show students, rather than take students through the museum itself, take them through what a home was like in 1930. Because that's not that far. That's soon going to be 100 years ago.
That's right.
What was it like?
Yeah.
What was the early telephone? How did you heat that home? How did you do this? How did you do that? Whereas you and I went to things where they said 1850.
Right.
To be relevant, I think we need to almost a laboratory, if you will, of it could be sort of kind of what I want to do with the Callaway cabin, but it was more fitting to do with it what's being done now.
Right.
Yeah,
but you were instrumental. I remember when you were working on the cabin and getting it moved.
Yeah.
And that's a great asset down there. And there's just not very many houses.
I think about that. Dan Beckner's gone. Paula Sue's gone. Garland Callaway's gone.
Don Roast about the only one left.
Don and myself and Chuck Picard helped with that. And Kathy Mucklin. There were several others who came down there and volunteered.
You bet. You bet. Well, Champ, it is 2:00, a little after now. It's been fun. We'll keep doing it.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Well,
and thank you for giving the lodge some time to tell our story.
Absolutely. It's just good that people know about their community, and we are also proud of Marshfield and Webster County, and I think we should just continue to share all we can about why we are who we are and how we got here and who helped us get here, and maybe some good cultural education will help the future generations be a little bit better folks than they might have been if we hadn't. That's my goal.
And if we can one more time,
hey
folks, next Saturday from 11 to 2, we would love to see you at the Masonic Temple on the corner of Washington Street and Pitts. Doors open right at 11. Bring $5 if you haven't bought a ticket yet, and a little more money if you want to contribute, and we'll see you there.
That's right. Well, that's great. And I will mention right now, since he said that, I am not going to have a podcast next week. I know I missed last week, but we are going to be out of town. It's spring break week this week. Not necessarily that's the reason we're going to be out of town, but I will not be here Saturday.
He's going to be in Panama City. Don't let him tell you any different.
I'll only be gone one night probably. But if you that'd be a great time to go on down to the lodge. Take the time that you normally would watch our podcast at 1 and go to the lodge and have lunch and help a good cause.
Get there a little earlier than that though.
Right.
I think we're going to have a big crowd because
I think you will too.
It's really the community response. I know they've sold hundreds of tickets. And so I'm going to make 2 big pots of gumbo.
Yeah. And the other thing I want to mention is the following week on March the 23rd, right here in our campus, we have the Retro Zone Arcade is going to have their annual pinball tournament. This is kind of the anniversary tournament. This I think the 6th or 7th year now for the arcade. Of course, we moved down from Crittenden Street, but Landon and Logan, my sons, operate the arcade. Landon predominantly. And so we invite you to, if you'd like to play pinball or just come and watch or be a part of that, or if you may know someone that would like to, it's a fun afternoon. That will be on the 23rd. But in addition to that, we're going to have a very special guest on the podcast at 1 o'clock. I'm not going to tell you who it is yet. We will, but it'll be someone that I think all of you will find very enjoyable and someone that's been a big part of our community
for many, many years. So mark your calendars for March 23rd for both of those events.
Don't miss it, folks.
Yeah. So with that, I think we'll leave you today.
Thank
Champ,
you, sir.
thanks
Appreciate
again.
it.
Appreciate you. We'll see you on March 23rd. Thanks.
Appreciate it, folks. Oh, we go now. It's not live, is it? Oh, it is? He needs to shut that off, dude. I thought you recorded it and then released it, dude.